Hello my dear art friend, welcome to watercolor mixing practice. This is truly something important you need to practice time to time if you want to get better at watercolor mixing. First, understanding classical color wheel of 3 primary colors, yellow, red and blue, then you can change pigments to different varieties. Different yellows, different reds and different blues. You can even pick pink instead of red or violet. These exercises will give you deeper understanding of watercolor mixing, pigment qualities, and you will get more familiar with watercolor pigments you already have in your paint box. Why it is important? First, when you pick any subject to paint, you will know how to mix color tone you need for that subject. And second, you will get freedom. No need to buy all the pigment color tones there are available. No need to have dozens and dozens of different color tones in your paint box. In fact, this flower color wheel was painted using only 3 pigments: yellow, pink and blue. Required art materials for watercolor mixing practice. I have my watercolor mixing notebook, which is designed for your best experience in watercolor mixing. Watercolors. I use professional watercolor pigments. In my watercolor set I have 14 pigments and I can mix almost any color tone I need. Paper towel, brushes. If you have my set of brushes, use round synthetic brush. Leave finer tip brush for finer paintings. Round synthetic brush is perfect. If you have an older brush, that's even better. You can also use flat brush. Without further ado, let's get into mixing classical color wheel. First practice page in watercolor mixing notebook is classical color wheel. And I will use 3 primary colors: yellow, red and blue. For this classical color wheel, I'm taking lemon yellow, writing down pigment name, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and writing down pigment name. It's important to write pigment name so you know which pigment you used. And starting to apply all 3 pigments completely clean, completely clear in the middle, leaving 3 sections gap in between. Transparently, don't use too much watercolors. Transparent amount of watercolors is just enough. In my case, I even added 2 light. No worries, we can go with another transparent layer. This paper holds it perfectly, watercolor paper holds it perfectly. Painting with round synthetic brush for smooth appliance of layers. Starting to apply red pigment. And only after I applied it, I noticed that I applied it in the wrong section. I didn't leave 3 gaps in between, so I applied as it is. And I'm not correcting. I will show you later how to correct these minor mistakes, and from mistakes we can learn. And I will show another example how you can mix watercolors a little bit later. But now I'm applying this alizarin crimson in the section. Correctly it would be to apply 1 section above, but again I will explain you later why it's completely okay to make these little mistakes. We can only benefit from mistakes. The more we are practicing making mistakes, the better. We are each time learning something. Applying another layer to make it a little bit saturated. Above each section, I'm writing down the amount of pigment that is used in that section and also pigment names. Now here I noticed that I made this minor mistake. I'm applying again alizarin crimson in the right place. First 2 watercolors that we are going to mix is yellow together with alizarin crimson. Starting from the upper part, which is closer to clean, clear yellow pigment. And I will add 3 little drops of pigment, and on the other section I'm adding 2 drops. and 1 drop is alizarin crimson. That is the proportion of pigment I'm using in that section. Little amount of red goes into yellow at this part. And it's very light orange watercolor mix. It's not yellow anymore. It's not completely orange, vividly looking orange. It's really pale orange between yellow. It's perfect for this first section. For the second section, I'm showing 2 drops of yellow and 2 drops of alizarin crimson or any red pigment that you have. In my mixing palette, I'm mixing equal amount of yellow and equal amount of red pigment. In my case, lemon yellow with alizarin crimson. Be sure that both of your pigments at this stage are wet, so you know that you are taking equal amounts. Painting out this watercolor mix, and we can see it's much saturated, vivid looking orange watercolor mix. It's brighter than the previous ones. It goes away from yellow color slowly towards the red one. Now we have 1 drop of yellow and 2 drops of red, which means a little bit of yellow and more red mix. In my case, lemon yellow with alizarin crimson. And this is the watercolor mix of very warm red pigment. It's also not anymore orange. It's really something between red and orange, of course. It's very warm red watercolor mix. If alizarin crimson compared to this one is very cool pigment, then this watercolor mix is definitely much warmer. Now I'm covering my mistake to write there other amount of watercolors that will be used. But before that, I have still all watercolor mixes that for each section that we pre-mixed. And if you see, and maybe you want a little bit brighter, you can take the same watercolor mix for each section and apply another layer. That is the question I receive quite often. How you make layers darker? Do you add some different pigment? No, I don't add any other pigment. I use the same watercolor mix, only another layer of transparent watercolor mix. And it's instantly, with second layer, becomes a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated. And also, I want to paint out little amount of these mixes in my notes section, and we can even see what we can achieve more. Let's add to the last watercolor mix a little bit more of alizarin crimson. It's still not very cool alizarin crimson color, it's still warm red. Adding a little bit more, and again, different variety of red watercolor mix together with yellows. This is the moment you can experiment. Try to add a little bit of more yellow. Combine. Make these really subtle transitions. Cleaning watercolor mixing tray, and we can mix next section, which is reds and blue. Now this little piece, which is a little mistake, I'm taking small amount of ultramarine blue, clean amount of ultramarine blue, and I'm glazing over this dry section of alizarin crimson. As I'm glazing, it becomes more violet rather than red. This is called, when you are layering and glazing watercolor mixes, you can even apply transparent layer of one clean pigment on top other clean pigment, and those pigments will mix because they are transparent and light is going through both layers, showing us different color. Second section is equal amount of ultramarine blue and equal amount of alizarin crimson. It's very vivid, beautiful violet color. And third section is more ultramarine blue and smaller amount of alizarin crimson. adding alizarin crimson, mixing both together and painting out a little bit more of ultramarine blue to make it closer to the blue rather to the red section. You can adjust as you apply watercolors. You see how color tones are changing, and if they are not, you need to add another pigment a little bit more. I will also leave a little piece of this glazing method in my notes section. I'm applying transparent layer of alizarin crimson and I will wait it to dry. While it's drying, I am painting out mixes that we did on color wheel. And now to the last mix, I will add a little bit more of ultramarine blue. It's again different, a little bit more of ultramarine blue. And it's like very deep purple color, but still not blue. And last is ultramarine blue, clean ultramarine blue. But you can add more variations. Now the layer of alizarin crimson is dry, and I'm taking clean ultramarine blue, transparent amount as you can see on my color palette, and glazing with round synthetic brush over alizarin crimson layer, writing down first layer and second layer. Now last three sections will be green color tone. We have 2 drops of ultramarine blue and 1 drop of lemon yellow. Applying, and this blue becomes more warmer than clear ultramarine blue. For the second section, I'm taking equal amount of ultramarine blue and equal amount of lemon yellow, mixing them both together, and we get green, clean green watercolor mix. Third, last section is 2 drops of lemon yellow and 1 drop of ultramarine blue. More yellow, lesser amount of blue. Very vivid green watercolor mix. It's not anymore yellow. Definitely very warm, very bright, adding a little touch more of ultramarine blue, but really with 2 mixes like lemon yellow and ultramarine blue, you can get a big variety of green watercolor mixes. That will be explained in other page of this watercolor mixing notebook, but this is a really base practice for watercolor mixing. Painting out watercolor mixes of lemon yellow and ultramarine blue, and watercolor mix that we got from mixing these both pigments. You can mix more. Write down color mixing recipes. Write down pigment names. Maybe some of your insights while you were doing this practice. This is an amazing opportunity to study deeper and to understand more watercolor mixing. I will show you in the project page how to make a watercolor study of a subject you picked for your next painting. We will need a subject, this is Calla Lily, watercolor brushes, but you can use also water brush pen that it is available with this notebook, watercolors, pencil, marker for writing notes, and an eraser. First, I will make a quick sketch of Calla Lily flower. When I make a sketch, I'm starting with lines. I'm not thinking about those beautiful curves, all the turns, just straight lines to set in form of this Calla Lily flower. Only after main lines are in places, I start to add some little bit of rounder corners, more wavy curves. This is a sketch, you don't need to be super precise just to get the main characteristic look of the flower or subject, leaves, composition, anything you want to make color mixing notes. After my sketch is finished, I will add pigments of watercolors I think I will need. I'm adding ultramarine blue, red violet, perlin violet, lemon yellow, sap green, alizarin crimson, and I also write down all the pigment names I use. Now to mixing watercolors. This is the process where you are experimenting with those pigments that you already have. Mix and match, try different combinations, color out on a paper that you have on this project page, and with real subject in front of you, it's amazing to practice watercolor mixes. As I started to mix watercolors, I noticed that I need more intensity to get this really deep color. I'm adding indigo to my mixing page, mixing new watercolors. Having real subject in front of you is one of the best ways to study watercolor mixes. You can compare, mix and match, and place real subject right beside your watercolor mix, and you will see, are you close, what you need more, maybe a little bit of other pigment. Here I noticed that I need more perlin violet to get this really deep color that I see in this calla lily. As I got what I need, I color it out in the square, place my subject, and I see that I got pretty close. Write down color recipe mix. Now make a quick sketch applying this watercolor mix to my calla lily flower. Nothing too precise, nothing too realistic. Just a quick sketch so you know what you were mixing, even if you will look in this project page after 1 year. You can add notes, proportions, maybe somewhere you add different color tone, like in curve area I added red violet, clean red violet. I wrote it down that in that specific area I add this pigment. This is really a raw sketch. You don't need to worry about the end result. This is for you, for your information. You don't even need to show someone if you don't wanna. Name your project. Write a name of the flower, leaves, or there are multiple flowers, multiple leaves. Maybe you wanna add special name. Anything you want. This is your sketchbook, your project page. Maybe you want to write date or place where you found this subject. You have some memories. Everything as you want. I wrote down what is required to get this really deep color, added extra notes, what I did, which pigments I used, how I applied them. You can finish quickly in 5 to 10 minutes, or you can put some extra effort and paint more layers to get it a little bit more realistic. It's up to you how you want your project page to look, or are you completely happy with super quick sketches? That is also completely okay, unless you understand which watercolors you used, how you mix those pigments. My calla lily project page is ready. I'm happy with the result. I can see clearly which watercolor mixes I need. Go and explore your subjects.